Welcome to this week's edition of The Floor is Yours. This week we will be discussing the Premier League's decision to change their summer transfer window. Stay tuned. Welcome to this week's session of The Floor is Yours. Today's topic is the Premier League's decision to change their transfer season. I'm gonna hand over to Vela to please just elaborate, and then we're gonna start to discuss from there.
All right, gentlemen of the jury, as I'm sure you guys saw in the news this week, the Premier League has taken the very bold decision of deciding to ensure that the transfer deadline now has been shifted to the Thursday before the Premier League starts. And this is 5 p.m. on the Thursday before, specifically for the summer transfer window. So what we'll see that they've implemented this for the transfer window before the 2018-19 season, and that's what was in the news this week, as I'm sure a lot of you guys will know.
All right, thanks for that, Vela. Kaya, what's your take on this? What do you think the rationale was for them to decide something like this?
The rationale, to answer your question, I don't know, I think it's just to also kind of, to have a bit more of a stamp on the squad. So like once your season starts, your squad is your squad. Not this thing of you start with certain players and you lose 2 or 3 after the season has begun and stuff. But when I think about this thing as a whole, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily against it. I'm only against the fact that the Premier League is the only league that is implementing this. For me, it's only fair if La Liga do it, and it's just a European thing. So that's my only qualm with it.
Yes, Fitz?
I don't understand the rationale because just like you pointed out, it only makes sense for all European clubs do it. If the Premier League closes early, it doesn't matter that you can't buy any more players because you can still lose players and you can't replace those players once you lose them. Mm-hmm. So I don't get what the point is unless they feel that maybe they have a strong enough pull that eventually all the other European leagues will fall in line. If that's the thinking, other than that, it's a loss for the Premier League in my opinion.
Do you guys think that this new policy, if it gets implemented throughout all of the top 5 leagues, do you think that this is where the summer transfer window is going? Do you think that this is something that makes sense, that could be good?
If all the teams do, if all the leagues do it, then yeah, it makes sense. Like it's possible for players to be replaced. It's possible, just business will happen in the same time. Like I think the problem is that the other leagues aren't doing it right now. That's the biggest problem. So if they're all doing it, then yeah, this actually could work.
Well, something to think about also, we must remember that the Premier League actually starts a week even before all of these other guys. So that's another situation. But what I've heard, what I read up on also is that we've heard people coming out from the other leagues, club presidents from the other leagues saying that they support England's decision due to what they believe the rationale being that you have your squad set in stone before the season starts. So you don't have a situation where particularly inter-league transfers, when there's transfers within the Premier League. So now a player who was at Tottenham, you play Tottenham on that weekend, but then he joins another club, and now you might play him twice now in a short time, even though he's moved from a club to another club. So it's just, I think the teams don't want this whole, and also like the panic buying, which happens after your first game of the season. Now you're spending a whole bunch of money just on a terrible result, which happened. Remember when Arsenal were beaten 8-2 by Man United. They bought 3 players in the next 2 days, and then before the deadline. So it becomes a situation where it makes teams know who they have and settled in who they have, and you make sure that everybody's like that. Nobody else is going to change,
Oh, we have a Snoop.
I just think that it's quite dumb from my stand, because it had to be something where all the leagues do it at the same time. Because like La Liga, they said it's not a high priority thing for them to do it. So clearly they're not going to do it anytime soon. They have other bigger things to handle. And on top of it, from what I read, I think, okay, Sharp, the window closes, right? But so you can't buy players, but then you can still sell players. So your team is still not set in stone because you can still lose players if a team comes in like PSG and they want to buy an Alexis Sanchez. Your guy can go, but now you can't cover. You can't buy a player that can come and cover. That's the problem that I have with it. So you're limited in buying. You can organize a team sharp. You can plan ahead, but some things like that happen, like where a big money transfer comes in and you lose a player, but you can't replace them. What happens then?
Also, just to add on what Vela was saying about teams, being set in stone, and all of that stuff. My thing is that it's also gonna put pressure on clubs. Like if all the leagues choose to fall in line, it's also gonna put pressure on managers and directors of football to get their transfers done a lot sooner. Do you know what I mean? So that's another aspect that people need to think about.
Yeah. Can I just 2 seconds, please, just 2 seconds. Just in terms of what you said and the question that you asked, Zungs, about whether this is where the clubs are going, this is where transfer windows are going. I think it is right that all clubs stop their business before the league starts, but I think the window should be the same duration. So maybe it should open earlier, as opposed to opening in July. Maybe it should open in June or like whatever. However, the league, the transfer window itself should be the same window, so that at least clubs still have the same opportunity to do the same amounts of business. Do you know what I mean? But I am in agreement with the fact that there should be the window should close before the league starts. All the leagues, all the European leagues.
Can I just quickly? The only problem with that is that because obviously players need to have medicals before they join a club.
Oh, true, and
if
internationals.
if it opens in June when most years there's international tournament, players can't complete transfers because they're the World Cup or the Euros or whatever.
But you can still initiate the club's agreement, and then personal terms can be decided.
It's all about the paperwork. I'm just gonna give Leto a chance this side.
I mean, like you guys were saying, the idea of organization and early organization is quite an attractive one, but I think it's something that needs to happen across all clubs. It needs to be a unanimous thing, There's no point in cutting the window short for one side and then the other side has an extended window, like you were saying. There's no point if Barcelona can come in and suddenly scoop your best player and then you can't replace him. That's detrimental to someone and potentially overly beneficial to someone else, And I think, what was I gonna say? Sorry. Yeah, on that, I was just touching on that. It's unfair. So it needs to be done across all the leagues, or just not at all. They need to realize that it's something that needs to be in sync.
But if I could just add on that. So we have a situation where the English transfer window is closed, right? So the other ones are open. What now happens is that now I can still let go of my players, right? But I can't replace them. So now, if a team bids for my player, they're going to have to... Do you know how much now they're going to have to bid for my player for me to even consider them leaving? Yeah. Because I'm trapped now. So now it's like, do I like money? Because it's just about money. Because I can't get a replacement.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So that's why I do think the Premier League is going to lead. It's going to happen. All the leagues will fall in line. The only league that I worry about not falling in line is La Liga, because La Liga is a direct competitor of the Premier League. So for them, they'll try to get any advantage they can get over the Premier League, and if that means they're able to have longer time to get in better players into their league, especially because their league has lost one of its brightest stars recently in Neymar, they're always going to look for an advantage to get the best players to come to their league and make their league better. So that's what's tricky for me. So it's like now a player who was worth... I mean, we've already seen how transfer values have gone now. Imagine what transfer values are going to become if England is the only league who decides to do this. Because now you're buying players from England. Now England is going to charge you
100 M's.
Max, childish money, because I can only think of replacing this player in January. Exactly. You see, so that's why we've actually heard positive things from Bundesliga, Serie A. It's just La Liga who are dragging their feet a little bit. But yeah, that's my take on that.
Davido?
I think Vela pretty much summed it up there with the pricing. If I'm an English club and I can't replace my best player and he's being looked at by a bigger team, I'm going to consider A, the fact that I can't replace him, and B, the fact that I have to wait until January, and the January market's already a mess enough already on its own. The January market is very inflated because of the rush to do business in a month is very quick, and what else can I say about it? It's very expensive to do business in January, so you consider both those factors, you're going to double your price essentially.
Yeah. Lacoops.
I think there's another thing to consider here, right? Let's say the Premier League is the only club that goes with this for at least for this upcoming season, right? The big clubs, the big clubs won't necessarily be a disadvantage that much because a lot of them either already have money or they have the opportunity to bolster their squads, whether it's in Jan or the summer transfer window in July. I think the people who don't benefit or the people who lose out the most are the small teams, right? Especially in the Premier League. So you know how the Premier League value just has rack. Like even the small teams have rack. They can afford to pull players and blah, blah, blah. Their business will be hindered the most because they can't afford to make deals early in the summer. Do you know what I mean? Because that's when all the big fish are still hunting. So they rely on the last leg of the summer window to do their business. So if you close it early for them they're losing. So Swansea can't sign Renato Sanchez, for example. You know what I mean? All of these small teams that do have the money now won't be able to use the money to get the players they need. Because they're the ones that need the most work done. They can't afford to necessarily put their money towards stadiums and all of that shit because that's too much rack, you know? So they have to find now ways to use that money, otherwise it becomes useless to them. So I think the small clubs in the Premier League will lose out the most if we're the only league, or if the Premier League is the only league to implement this decision.
Yeah, it's that issue of bargaining power. Like that's why teams like the smaller teams can have a bargaining power in the league because they have that money, so they can fetch players from like big teams in other leagues. But now if you're gonna cut that short and they don't have enough money, then it's gonna be a problem. So now you also have to think about the smaller teams. For example, I think Jeezy has the teams. A lot of small teams voted against it.
Yeah,
because they
please
realized
tell us the list of teams that voted against the window closing early.
The summer transfer window being shortened were Watford, Swansea, Palace, both City and United, and then Burnley were the only club in the Premier League who abstained. Otherwise, everyone else, there were 14 clubs remaining, voted for the window to be shortened.
You see, and those clubs that voted against it, like your Palaces and whatnot, they may not be the most prolific teams in the Premier League, but they're known to sell and buy players. Those are the small teams that really rely on the transfer market. Whereas the big teams, yes, they are reliant on the transfer market, but most of them are just adding little pieces. It's not as big a revamp as the smaller clubs experience every season. So that's the biggest cry, I think.
Oaks, sorry. I have a question. What do you think the impact, how this is going to impact players now wanting to come to England and players wanting to leave England? Is this not something that might make the Premier League unattractive? I don't know if first.
I think it's a two-way street. Let's look at Coutinho, right? If Premier League is the only league that decides to do this, Coutinho is wanting out in May. He's wanting out in May. He's chatting in May and saying, "Look, I want to leave now because I don't have that much time to get my transfer window done." Right? But in another sense, it benefits the Premier League in such, or it doesn't hinder the Premier League in such a way that doesn't matter how long the transfer window is, the Premier League always has rack. The Premier League's always going to have rack. It just means that clubs might have to splash a bit more, but there will always be an allure for the Premier League. I don't think it will necessarily do bad for their image or do bad for players wanting to come through. I just think it'll only be a problem for once away players because they'll be pressing the clubs to make deals happen as soon as possible, which could disrupt the team.
Yeah, that Dave.
Yeah, and on a lower level, you're talking about the smaller teams just now. Teams that tend to loan a lot, especially with an example like Renato Sanchez, they'll be depending on a big team to do their business and then feel like they can be in a position to loan that player. Now, if they're more rushed to secure that business, they've got less time to talk to those big clubs. It's a bit more uncomfortable for them, you see. Yeah.
And I think that's so interesting is that with Palace and Swansea, is that Palace just had that Sanchez deal, and then obviously, Swansea had that Sanchez deal, and then you have Palace with Mamadou Sakho. You know, they did Mamadou Sakho very late. So yeah, those big. I do understand the smaller team. chat very much. But what I think is very interesting is the two big teams who voted who voted with it, who voted against it rather, being the two Manchester clubs, United and City. Because Manchester United, from what I'm thinking, now this is just coming straight from me, Manchester United and Manchester City, they make big signings. And big signings take time to put together. And I think that's probably the point that they came from. They were like, we trying to make the biggest transfers in the world, and these don't take short time. You know what I mean? You let the market play. You see how the market is going, and then you try and negotiate prices through that. What I think they saw is that by making it smaller, prices go up. Now the bigger prices even also go up. So now it's just that knock-on effect. It accelerates this thing that we've been seeing of these transfer fees being so exorbitant as they are now. So maybe that was the danger that they saw in Manchester particularly.
First,
Yeah, I think just on that, I think you're spot on there, Vela, because, and it's not even the fact that they make big signings, it's the amount of big signings they make. United and City are quite well known for making 2 marquee signings, 3 marquee signings in a season, you know? And especially City recently, they're not shy of getting their business done early, and even if they don't catch some of the signings that they wanted, they're not shy in revisiting those signings once they've made other signings. So they need that extra duration. In terms of the teams like Arsenal, for example, who voted for it, it makes complete sense because we only sign 1 player a season. We have no pull in the transfer markets. Every single product that we make wants to leave at some stage. So we don't even use the transfer market. That's the whole point. So it makes sense why we would want to cut it, because we can only afford to make 1 signing who isn't even a marquee signing. It's just most of the time it's a patch up or like a panic buy kind of thing. So in terms of the big clubs that did vote against it, it's mostly the clubs that are maybe known for cultivating players and selling them. You know what I mean?
all right then. Any more comments before we wrap it up? All right then. Thank you for that, lads. Interesting thoughts, and that concludes our session of The Floor Is Yours. Thank you.